The Chalke History Festival special series on history with Jackson. Hello and welcome to History Jackson, the home of accessible and digestible history. And welcome to our Chalke History Festival special series, where we'll be talking to some of the historians, living historians and performers here at Chalke about what they're doing at the festival and their work. Now, Chalke History Festival will be covered comprehensively through History Jackson, be it on our social media, our blog, and our podcast. So if you wanted to check out more and learn more about what's happening at Chalke, do head to the links in the description below. Now, without further ado, I'll leave you to our Chalke History Festival special series episode. So hello and welcome to the Chalke History Festival special series here on History Jackson, and we're here with Tracy Borman. How are you doing, Tracy?
I'm very well, thank you, and it's a beautiful day.
It is a stunning day, and I've just stupidly decided to run across campus. I'm still in that uni mindset. But today, you're doing two talks. You're incredibly busy.
Yes. So the first one is, I think, almost a world premiere. It's a new talk I've developed for Chalke, and it's about my day job at Historic Royal Palaces and its secrets of the palaces. So some of my favourite stories, my favourite spaces, and it's exciting to be giving that talk to a public audience for the first time here at Chalke. And then I'm really very honoured to be with one of my all-time history heroes, Michael Wood, when we're going to be discussing the power of the leader. Rather topical.
Yeah, yeah, incredibly apt. But let's start with the Historic Royal Palaces. You're chief curator at Historic Royal Palaces. Why do you feel it's important for us not only to learn about these places, but to learn about their dark histories, the histories we don't often come across?
Yeah, I think that's so important because, we might know that the famous celebratory events, the big moments of Henry VIII's reign, his, of course, 6 marriages, but there are darker histories as well, and I think it's so important that we tell those hidden histories. So at the moment at Kensington Palace we have an exhibition called Untold Lives about the people who worked at the courts, who tend to be in the shadows, and their lives are just as integral to the history of the palaces. And so it's a joy to be able to tell those kind of stories as well.
And I think that's really important to give a voice to the people who didn't have a voice in that moment.
Yeah.
And why do we think that they've been erased from our telling of the stories of these buildings?
Yeah, I guess history is written by the winners, as it was often said, and their contribution, they're just they're sort of bit offstage personalities who kept the show running but not considered interesting in their own right. But what we found is they are fascinating. They have some important stories to tell, and it's social history. Now, I freely admit I specialise in the ones at the centre stage, the royals, the courtiers. But I find it fascinating as well to be able to look at these more hidden histories.
No, I totally agree. Sometimes when you're so fixated on these big figures, it's nice to see everyone else who's around and supporting them. But how did you come to be focusing on what you do in your history career, looking at these big figures, but also working on Historic Royal Palaces?
So it's all thanks to my A-level history teacher, Mrs. Jones, who inspired me with the Tudors. And I think it was a light bulb moment for me, because what Mrs. Jones did was to really bring it home that these are just human beings, and human nature hasn't changed that much in 500 years. She taught me the Tudors for A-level, and she had the copies of the portraits, the Holbein portraits and the like, all the way around the walls of her classroom. And that was it. I was utterly hooked. I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do, how I'm going to make a living with this, but it has to involve Tudor history.
No, I love that, because the personal touch that we get from historians when we ask them about that is just beautiful. And it's always a history teacher.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's usually always. So for me, it was Mr. Brown.
Oh, there you go.
Wars of the Roses in Russia. So
it makes such a difference, doesn't it?
It really, and it adds a personal touch.
Yeah. And I think it's important to, really pay tribute to amazing teachers because they can make or break a subject. I'm not going to name names, but I hate maths and science, and that had a little bit to do with my teachers. But you know, my history teacher, she's an absolute legend, and I'm not the only one by any means who she's inspired.
Oh, that's a lovely answer. And I'll join the club on maths and sciences there.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, that's more about me. I'm just terrible at that kind of thing.
I don't even bother adding up anymore.
No, me neither.
Now, talking about personal touch, your talk with Michael Wood about power and leaders. Michael was just talking to us about how it's very apt for today's world. Now, how did you come across wanting to do something about that subject?
Well, it's interesting because I have written mostly about Elizabeth I, and of course, she has to go down as one of the most inspirational leaders in, well, certainly British history. And she broke the mould. She shouldn't have been a great leader. She was a woman in a man's world, and yet she confounded expectations. She became the longest reigning, arguably the most successful of the Tudors, and yet she was just the forgotten younger daughter of Henry VIII. And that, for me, really speaks to her qualities as a queen, but also as a leader. She got the whole country behind her when they thought she wouldn't last 5 minutes.
I think she's a truly inspiring leader, and probably Henry VIII's true heir in the way that she led.
Yeah, he would have hated that, actually. He didn't give her a second thought. It was all about his son, Edward VI, but he burnt out after 6 years, fell ill, and he had the makings of being, I think, not a great leader, but a great tyrant. And Mary as well, Elizabeth's elder half-sister, she was so dogmatic, so focused on her own beliefs, and she didn't have that sense of the popular mood that I think is a key ingredient of a great leader.
And I certainly agree with your assessment of Edward there. He definitely had those makings.
He did, yeah. Would it be harsh to say saved from that by his early death? Yeah.
So how do you find these qualities are perhaps reflected in the leaders of today?
Oh goodness, I'm not even sure they are. I will
Maybe Edward.
I will freely admit politics is not my thing, so I'm not even going to lower the tone by making rubbish parallels. I think perhaps there's a bit of Elizabethan propaganda that you see sometimes with the sort of soundbite politics, and it's all about what you say, not the meaning behind it, and the sort of integrity behind it, and that is a sort of not very good version of Elizabethan propaganda, because she had the goods to back up what she said, and I think we've got into soundbite politics in recent years, and that's not true leadership.
And I think that's an interesting take on what's happening today. We're looking at an aspect of Elizabeth's rule which is perhaps underlooked at. Underlooked's not the right word. It's not really a word, but it's not really appreciated in the public sphere.
Absolutely. This was true propaganda, and I think it's therefore one of the sort of cornerstones of her leadership was the fact she was just so brilliant at managing her public image, but in a very authentic way. It's not just sound bites and headlines and pretending to be something she wasn't. She was celebrating her virginity, for example, and that was pretty awesome in an age dominated by men, when women's sole ambition was to marry well.
And I think the way that she did that in her speeches and rallied her troops around her was, again, I've said inspirational so many times, but she is an inspirational leader.
The body of a weak and feeble woman and all that famous Armada speech. And I'm going to be actually reading out an excerpt from one of my favourite speeches that Elizabeth gave, that I think is the very essence of her leadership.
And you can't not quote Elizabeth if you're talking about her.
I know, you can't, because basically she says it better than anybody is ever going to stand a hope of doing.
Now, I've got a final fun question for you, Tracy. We're at Chalke History Festival, obviously, in the baking sun, but what has been your favourite thing that you've seen, heard, or you're looking forward to seeing today at Chalke?
Well, it has to be Nicola Tallis. I'm a huge fan, and she is talking about her new book, Young Elizabeth, and I can tell you that it's just one of the best history books I've read in years. Of course, it's about my favourite subject, but Nicola is such an exceptional historian, and I think she's going to be utterly brilliant.
And that's a really lovely answer, to see historians supporting each other.
Oh, yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. Great friends as well, and I think it's great because we we share our knowledge, and it's I think it's a very friendly field. Of course, it can be competitive like everything else, but people genuinely, we just like to nerd out together.
Yeah. Oh, and that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, if people are going to want to go away and grab some copy of your work, where can they head?
Well, my books are available everywhere you get your books, and I've also got a website, tracyborman.co.uk.
Oh, you took my next question right out of my mouth. So thank you very much, Tracy. Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for coming on.